What is up, everybody? Welcome to Video Game Music Alliance. My name is Stephen Melin. Here today, we are live with some of our pro members from Video Game Music Alliance, which is super exciting. This is actually the very first time I've ever tried this setup before, where I'm sharing my screen, which is a Pro Tools session, while simultaneously trying to stream this on YouTube. So hopefully this goes out super well with no tech glitches. I'm going to do my very best to stay focused. But this is an exciting day because we are actually teamed up for this month throughout March. We're teamed up with Royale Monkey, which is a development team who has put together this really cool indie game. And one of the things we tried to do inside VGMA Pro membership is we tried to give real life experiences. We try to give opportunities to get feedback from real game developers, to work on real games, and to get that experience. And so what we're doing today is we have a gameplay clip from a game called Avian, made by Royale Monkey. And essentially, this is kind of like Journey, or might even call it like Flow, or any of the That Game Company games. And even if I just scrub through this gameplay clip right here, let's see if I can talk over it. Maybe. You can kind of get a gist for what we're doing here today. This is essentially an exploration game that's going to need some ambient music. And the idea is all of our composers who participated today, they have written some music to this clip. Or for those who are able to download the actual game, they could actually get their hands on and play around with it. And toggle the settings within the game. But the idea here is everyone that's represented here today is either writing a music track that would be ambient background music to the game, or they wrote stems or layers. And so we have multiple lanes within our community that have to do with the experience level of where everybody's at in their career. So for those in the Kickstarter lane, today we have Eugene. We have Eugene Des for his track Devotion. We have Courtney Myers, who has the track Purpose Restored, and Johannes van Streek, The Glittering Woods. And so what we're doing here today is we're going to play through these tracks, and we're going to actually play it to the gameplay footage to see how well does this actually work. And this is going to be a conversation with us live here in our Zoom room, but also on YouTube Live as well. We want to open the conversation. And we'd love to hear your feedback, just some general feedback of, does this music fit? Does it feel like the right tempo? Does it feel like the right instrumentation? Maybe the right instruments, that kind of thing. And ultimately, does this fit the scene? And so the first three people, we're going to be playing through their tracks and talking through those. And those are just full mix tracks. And then for our Launchpad and Accelerator lane members, we took it one step further. Instead of just having a full mix track, what we did is we had them split up all of the layers into stems. And that way we can actually play around with the levels and see how it really works inside the game. Because this is what you do when you're working inside a game engine, such as Unity or Unreal or something else. This is what we do. This is how we work with the game developers. We give them multiple stems, and then sometimes they play around with them. Sometimes we play around with them until we find a good fit. So I'm really excited to jump through this today. It's going to be a bit of a shorter stream, but I hope that it's still very valuable for everyone involved. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into it. So the first person today is Eugene, and he has a track called Devotion. So Eugene here, he is with us. So Eugene, let's turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about your track and the approach that you took to writing this today.
Everybody, nice to see all of you. So with this track, I started with the like main bad instrument that I have there. It's like a ukulele guitar tremolo thing. I just found it very, appropriate for this track. So that was my like focus instrument for this. I laid down harmony with it, and after that, I just started, laying all the other instruments and building the whole arrangement. I tried to follow my instinct and follow a very, very obvious atmosphere of the game. Initially I thought of adding like cello to it or something like that, but it quickly turned into like a weird mock-up of Journey, so it was not the route to take. So yeah, just try to follow my instinct and uh, make it more abstract in a way.
Okay, well, very cool. I'm excited for us to jump into this. So, as mentioned before, if you're in the live chat right now, let's hear your thoughts about just kind of the initial experience of what this feels like put to picture. So what I'm going to do, since it's just a full mix track, I'm going to solo his track, and I'm also going to keep the sound effects in the background. I'm going to keep them a little bit lighter than they might normally be so we can hear the track. But let's jump in. I'm excited. Very cool, dude. Very cool. So what I love to do is I want to do 2 passes for everybody. I want to play through everything twice. We're going to do one more pass of this in just a moment after we talk about it, just so we can hear it with some fresh ears. I'd love to hear any feedback from our live audience inside the Zoom chat. What are some initial thoughts? I know Matt posted something on there.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I just said in the live chat that I really love the harp rolls and the vocal pads that come in and out especially. Thought those were very cool and fit the atmosphere extremely well.
Do you want us to respond vocally or in a...
Yeah. Oh, since you're on camera, yeah, talk.
And I figure, why not? Yeah, I really like the sound choice, the instrument selections, especially in the very beginning, just hearing that tremolo, stringy instrument. I thought that was really, really fitting. It's a really cool atmosphere.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think one of the challenges of this clip is that even though you want ambient music for it, the visuals are very dynamic. There's a lot of diversity in the visuals, and so finding a diverse palette of sounds which reflect that is definitely a challenge, and I think that Eugene did a really good job with that. So,
yeah, I would also like to say that I just think the balance in the track is really beautiful. It's not overwritten, which is something I certainly struggle with. I think it sounds fantastic, the ambience.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. It was also a bit of a challenge not to clash with the instrument mechanic of the game. Yeah, so and not to overwrite it, not to not to bring so many like different palettes and different instruments. But thank you so much for your words, and yeah, let's continue.
Yeah, I agree with that. I particularly like the tempo that is really not too slow, not too fast, but it felt like a walking pace. And you had these little, they weren't little, but the piano hits in the background, they seemed to match the percussion, where it was like this big low notes, which kind of marks the key and the scale, but it also gave this juxtaposition of light and dark. So obviously we have a lot of vibrant, bright colors, but it's a cave type environment, a jungle type environment. So I think you did a really interesting job and very unique. It creates a very unique sonic palette to have those really high woodwind type sounds next to the dark piano. So kudos to you. So I'd love to play this one more time, but this time I'm going to balance the levels I'll do this for everybody. I want us to all hear it where the sound effects are louder than the music as you would actually experience it in the game, which I think is valuable as well. So let's take one more pass of Eugene's track called Devotion. And this time, I'm going to switch these around. All right, well done, Eugene. Everybody in the live chat, let's give some clap emojis. Really, really well done. So now let's move on to our next victim. Remember, we have Courtney, Purpose Restored. I don't think Courtney's with us today.
I'm here.
You are here. Hi.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm just not on camera. Sorry.
No worries. Well, by all means. See, I can't see everybody on my Zoom right now. I'm glad you're here. Will you tell us a little bit about your experience writing this track?
Sure. So this actually ended up being my third attempt. The first two, I tried to do something a little more soundscapey, but I wasn't able to find a good balance between the game sound effects. And then as I watched the clip more, I thought something with a more kind of exploratory driving feel might be more appropriate. So I went with that direction. Started off with kind of the bass line and then a little bit of the A section and just built it out from there, trying to use instruments that suit the environment.
Very cool. Well, I'm excited to hear this. I do want to keep the sound effects on for the first time, but we're going to turn them way down. And let's check it out. So this track is called Purpose Restored by Courtney Myers. Here we go. All right, let's hear some feedback for Courtney. Anybody in the live chat? I should specify in our VGMA group. What are some initial thoughts?
I think it sounds very determined, and it reminded me of like one of the prompts. And I'm looking through the PDF we had of like the sound direction, and it reminded me. I feel like you nailed one of those or a couple of those. One of them was puzzle ambience with reward, and music thematic, and acoustic space. At least the with reward part is kind of what I felt. It's just like determination of like accomplishing this level or something like that. So yeah, I liked that.
Yeah, I agree with Jake. Perfect work, and I really love the instrumentation that you used. Really appropriate, and the harmonic flow was like super enjoyable. Just really fitting the gameplay aspect of it.
Yeah, I had a very similar feedback to Eugene. I really loved the sound selection throughout the piece, and also like the way the interplay between the different instrument sections I thought was really, really cool.
Anybody else want to share? No worries. I'll get my 2 cents. So Courtney, really cool job on this. I want to echo specifically what Matt said about the instrument, the playfulness between the different sections. I really enjoyed how you had a little melody, da, 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 and then you switch to a different instrument, ya, da, 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 and it just kind of kept it very playful and exploration feeling, which I think nails the vibe of this game. My one note, so I would say that the composition of it is very strong. One production note that you might want to consider is because we're in a cave-like environment, very open spaces, and because the devs specifically wanted ambient music, I would love to hear a little bit more, either maybe like a synth pad or a string pad, something that has a little bit more sustain, since so much of what you're doing are like mallet-type instruments, which have a lot of percussion, like a lot of short notes. It would be nice to have something to help give a little bit more space and airiness. And the other way of doing that from a production standpoint is to use a bit more reverb or delay effects. But I think the core material there is very strong. And I would actually encourage you maybe to do another version of this that would have a little bit more of the ambient side of it. Otherwise, I do agree with what Jake said, that this lends itself more to like a reward puzzle type feel versus an ambient exploration. So just some food for thought there. But what I'd love to do, yeah, thank you, Courtney. So what I'd love to do is let's play this one more time. This time I'm going to shift the levels quite a bit. So I'm going to turn her track way down and turn the sound effects up just so we can experience this one more time. Some fresh ears. So once again, this is Courtney Meyer's track Purpose Restored. Here we go. All right, so let's move on to our next. Let's give a round of applause to Courtney. Woohoo! And of course, inside the live chat, let's give some clap emojis. Next up, we have Johannes van Streek. His track is called The Glittering Woods. I don't think Johannes is with us today, but he'll catch us on the replay of this. So let's jump in here. I don't have any feedback specifically, but that's okay. We can still talk it up and give him lots of great feedback here inside, so you can come back and check it out. So let's jump right in. This is The Glittering Woods. Wow. Okay. Super interesting track. I want to save my comments for last because I'm in Pro Tools and I'm in control of this session, I'm going to play with it. Who wants to give some feedback? Super cool.
I'll jump in. We were talking about this a bit in the YouTube live chat. I thought the wood blocks and the marimbas are really cool. And I think this track has a really good balance of like sustain elements with the strings and the pads, and then the percussive elements kind of popping in here and there, which really pique the listener's interest. And I think it's really cool.
I think I agree with what Matt said with like the percussive elements. I loved that, and I thought it was super, super fitting. One like tiny mixing comment was I thought the vibra slap was a little too loud.
Yeah, it was.
But like,
it was so distracting.
Yeah, it just was kind of like, whoa, just kind of jumped up. But that's an easy fix. But another one is, I wanted more of the ambience. Like he had the choir going on, and then later the strings, which I thought were super, super pretty. But I wanted more of that kind of just scattered throughout, and just sort of being an undertone to the percussive raindrops, if you call it. But yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, also really enjoyed, and I think it's a good example of a really a background track to complement what is going on the screen. I really enjoyed how Johannes used silence and spaces between different parts, and especially you have this anticipation before this crescendo of strings coming in. Great touch, I think. I would also notch a little bit down the percussion in this track, maybe add even a little bit more reverb on choir to make it more ethereal maybe, but all in all it's a perfect track.
Yeah, I liked all of the different elements in it for sure. I thought that they all worked really well. One thing I would say, I think, is that to me it felt like all the ingredients were there for the track to work really, really well, but it didn't quite feel cohesive to me. It felt like there were a bunch of different little sections to it, which individually work great for the scene, but they weren't quite married to each other. So, but yeah, overall, I thought it was awesome.
Anybody else before I jump in? Cool. Yeah, fantastic feedback. Really cool track. Something I wanted to try just because we're here and we can. I wanted to see what this would sound like. Maybe you guys agree with me. I feel like this last section, the strings were the money. Like that's where this track needs to live. So I'm going to take this, and this is one of the things that you can do when you're working inside a DAW session, specifically after the fact. You can think more like an editor. So what I want to do is start with the beginning. I'm going to turn my, let me do this first. I want to grab a plugin. My favorite, if I could spell, would be awesome. There we go. 2C Aether is a reverb I like to use for orchestral music. I'm going to put on Hall 2, and because it already has some reverb, I'm going to turn it way down to like 20%. And then my initial thought for this track was the arrangement is really where it just needs a little bit of help. I would actually start this track with this string swell. And he has a big old swell here. I would actually take these two moments and turn them down considerably. Volume-wise, they're just a little bit too extreme, waveform-wise. And then I would do a big old fade, if I get the right tool here. I can't see anything. I have so many windows up. There we go. Oh, man. If I go over here, let's make it an S-curve, equal power, just so it has a little bit of a ramp. But the idea here, he has a lot of space, too much for my liking, but I would drag this over here. Everything's just kind of chopped up, but I would love to see specifically, I feel like he just started the track in the wrong spot. And I would have loved this to be the actual start of the track is over here. Something like that. Let's see if this makes any difference. Let's see what you guys think. That vibra.
Yeah, that was way different. I thought it worked a lot better that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think those crescendos are it's a perfect way to complement the theme of the game itself, which is like a beautiful world, but is corrupted with something dark. And it's bringing this notch of something is not right in the world. And when it's continuing with that choir after that, yeah, I think it's more cohesive this way, and I like it.
Cool. So that's an idea for you, Johannes. If you're watching this back, I hope you'll do something like that. So sometimes what happens as composers is we have all of the right ingredients, we have all of the right pieces to the puzzle, but sometimes it just doesn't fit the scene only because we started at the wrong spot or not the most effective spot, or we have so many different things that we forgot to combine some of them together. So I think this is just one of those moments that the ambience worked really well. We just needed more of it kind of scattered throughout, a bit more reverb, and it's just one idea. So let's move on for the sake of time. Let's move on to... Now we're going to move into the section of all of our participants who are part of the Launchpad or the Accelerator lanes. So these are the more advanced lanes inside VGMA Pro. And for this assignment, they had the same goal of writing music to the scene or to the gameplay, but we also wanted to give them the challenge, a very real-life scenario of creating layers. So whenever they had the full mix, you should be able to take any one of these layers and it should be able to work to picture, but you should also be able to add any other layer, a stem, if you will. And in doing so, it should give the game developers a lot of options, especially as the gameplay changes. These are called game states. So for example, let's say that one of these flowers opens up, which is like a core gameplay mechanic here. What if as soon as you open up the flower, the bass line comes in, right? Or the drums come in, something happens, especially in a puzzle solving game where there's very, very minimal dialogue, if any. You need the sound design itself and the music to tell the story, to help paint the picture, to help tell the player where to go next and what to do. It's kind of like the quintessential Zelda sound, right? When you unlock something, it's like, oh, I need to go look for what I just unlocked. Or you open a treasure chest, right? Sound design propels the player forward, and it's very essential. So I'm excited to jump into these. So first of all, we have Caleb. He is with us with his track Water and Stone. So can you walk us through specifically, not just how you wrote it, but your mentality going into this whole layer portion of the assignment?
Sure, yeah. I thought this was such a fun project. Yeah, the visuals are just so unique. That was really, really enjoyable. Going into it, so this is my first attempt at a layered piece like this. So it was a fun challenge. Initially, the first thing I did was find the tempo before I even wrote a note. I just had the click going, trying to find the right tempo for it. And then the other thing I wanted from this track is I wanted the actual notes to be very, very simple, to sort of express the more ambient feel of it. And to that end, what that meant is that I needed to find sounds that were really unique and could hold up on their own. So I spent probably over half of my composition time with this one just looking for sounds. Once I found them, then the composition process went really quickly. And then layer-wise, I had sort of two layers that I was working with, a more ambient type layer, and then a more percussion layer. And that's actually one of the challenges I had with this piece is 2 layers isn't a lot. Maybe it's enough, but it's not a lot. But I was having a difficult time figuring out where I could add another layer without over cluttering the piece. So, yeah.
Well, we're excited to listen to it. So for these tracks, what I want to do is, instead of just playing through exactly the same way we just did, I want to keep the sound effects layer on. And the first pass, I want us to do the mix, the full mix, where we can just kind of experience the track just like we did. But then the second pass, after we talk through it, I want to specifically play with the layers to see what we might be able to do, to see how effective that is. So here we go. We're going to play Water and Stone by Caleb Linville. To the picture. Here we go. All right, let's get some feedback. Who wants to start?
I'll start. This is such an interesting approach, and I really like the mischievousness of the whole piece, like playing light and dark, maybe a little too dark, but for some reason the combo of choir plus percussion reminded me of Diablo for some reason, but that's a compliment. And yeah, just I really like when there's a like more cheerful visuals, but in music something is not that something is not going right in terms of the atmosphere, which is, I think it's a very nice play with this track.
Yeah, to tag off of what Eugene said, I feel like the mood or the tone that I felt from it was on the darker side, but it was very puzzle-like. Like it was, and then what I mean by that is it was ambiguous. It wasn't super light or super dark. It was just like, okay, we're here and we're in a cave trying to figure this out, which is perfect. We're staring at a blue cave right now on Steven's screen. So I think you hit that vibe perfectly. The thing that I thought sounded kind of off was the percussion instrument. I don't know what it was. The dun, dun, dun. It sounded like the pitch started like, whoops, hit the mic. The chords you were playing weren't matching the pitch of that note. So maybe either change the pitch of the percussion instrument or make sure all those chords are aligned with that hit. But that was one comment I had.
I think it's... Go ahead, Matt. Did you want to...
Yeah, I'll jump in. I agree with Jake's comment, but one thing production-wise that I really liked about the way that you structured this track was that I think you did a really good job with the stereo image, in that that percussion element was very much in the center, so to sort of keep that energy going, and you did a great job of like making the choir very wide, so it was like you had the energy in the center and then the ambience on the sides of the stereo spectrum, and I thought that balance was awesome.
Well, I really enjoyed this for different reasons. I'll comment specifically on the pitched percussion, because to me that really stood out the most. And I want to make sure I say this well, that tension sometimes is intentional in video games. This track actually gave me very strong Metroid Prime vibes. And I say that because in an exploration puzzle-like game, sometimes the world you're in is like an alien world. It's unsettling. It's not supposed to feel comfortable. You're not supposed to be relaxed. And sometimes that's just intentional. And that's why I love that you can do video game music in so many different styles. This one scene could be scored 1,000 ways, and it could all be correct. So I don't want to judge that necessarily just because it's not the way I would do it. But I do want to speak specifically on the pitch you chose. It seemed like it was like a minor third off of the tone, like the key. And I'd love to play with that if we have a moment. But I like that it's a pitched percussion because it adds tension. But because I just want to comment on what Jake said, that the pitch seemed to constantly be the wrong pitch. When it's knocked against the chords moving around, it felt unsettling, almost too unsettling. So I'd love if we could play with that. But first, let's run a little experiment. Let's run the sound effects at the normal level, and then let's add one layer at a time, and let's play around a little bit and see what we're able to do with it to see if we can get it even closer to fitting the vibe. All right, so what the heck was I doing? Of course, there's no right or wrong answer here. This is just an artistic expression. What I sense that what you're doing with this percussion is you're trying to create some tension and these big thud hits. What I felt was missing is it felt too forward and way too loud in the mix. But even once we turned it down, it was almost like that pitch was like grating a little bit. I do like that you changed it a bit throughout the track, but I was just kind of experimenting with playing a little bit with the fine tuning of the pitch. That way it's not so much off key. So it kind of is a little bit closer. But then just play with EQ just to see, okay, this has some like big hits in it. So let's give it some low end, not too low, but just some low end. But also a lot of the bell high end is what's really getting grating, but we don't want to lose volume. So instead I went down here and I just kind of boosted these two ranges here around the 50 mark and the 500 mark. And then just for fun, just kind of experiment a little bit, I threw B2, which is like a extreme like shimmer delay, just to give it some more space. And I'm happy with it as is, but of course, this is your track, so you do whatever you want with it. But just for fun, let's play out with the sound effects, just a little bit of it, and then we'll move on. But in any case, let's all give some clap emojis for Caleb. Really cool track. Very cool stuff. Good job, man. All right, let's move on to Claire. Claire is with us, and she wrote a track called Curious Ancients, and it has a couple layers in here as well. So, Claire, if you don't mind, let's hear your experience working on this, and specifically working with layers.
This one's a really fun one to do because it's the first time I really wrote something while trying to consider what's happening as audio-wise in the game. So initially when I started it, it was kind of more faster paced and just overall more busy, but I decided that really wasn't working. So I really decided to lean into like the Breath of the Wild type sound and just give it a lot of space. As far as exporting the stems and everything, it's my first time ever doing that. So honestly, this might actually end up working better as just one loop. But, you know, I gave it a shot and saw what I could do with it. So that's basically it.
Well, cool. Looking forward to hearing it. Let's jump in. So let's start with just the mix. I'm going to turn down the sound effects a little bit so we can hear it. And here we go. Wow, let's get some feedback on that. I think there were smiles all over the room.
I'll jump in. I really liked all of it. I thought it was really. I liked the textures he had, like the little bell, and just the general atmosphere. I just thought it was really, really cool. There are just two comments I had feedback wise. One is I noticed like halfway through that you had some pads going on in there. Maybe it was the atmosphere track. I'm not sure which track it was in, but I wanted more of that. Maybe just a little louder or something. I just wanted some sort of undertone ambient stuff to kind of give us some weight, some foundation. And the other comment was I just felt like the piano, the sound of it just felt out of place compared to the other textures, synthy textures. And I think that'd be a simple fix as well. But yeah, it was really cool. Really good job.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit in the YouTube live chat that especially that synth run is extremely cool, and you know it's kind of what I was talking about with Caleb's track. It gives a really cool sense of like space in the stereo field. So having it panned a little bit to the left, but then you hear the ambience fairly pronounced like on the right, like the tail of it. I thought that was extremely cool.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the minimalist approach that you had. Like there wasn't much there, but everything you had there was really, really high quality. A lot of, just really.
Oh no, we lost him. Really what? Oh man, if he comes back, we'll catch up. Really cool track, Claire. This is super fun. I want to see what we can do with the layers themselves to see if perhaps there's a way by isolating them, there might be a way to massage it a little bit. But let's start by playing the sound effects track with the atmosphere, and let's see what that feels like. So it looks like it doesn't even come in until a good while in. So if there's a way to get this guy to come sooner. Interesting. I want to investigate this real quick. See what's going on. Okay, so these are all your synth stuff. That's fantastic. This is the piano then. Okay, so here's a quick note, just from a production standpoint, that it would be more helpful for delivering layers. Whenever you have two sounds that are just very different, it's good to separate them as layers or as stems. So in this case, I would have that atmosphere would be anything pad related, synth pad, any of those texture. You could call it textures or atmospheres, and then just have a separate, if there's ever piano involved, just have a separate track for piano. That way you can isolate those, because piano is something that is always argued about how high the level should be and like what kind of effects you should do on it. So whenever you have that as a separate stem, that's very helpful. So what I'm going to do, just as a kind of a global entity here, as the atmosphere, I'm going to throw an EQ on it. Maybe to help that piano fit a little bit stronger. I'm just going to duck the highs and the lows a little bit. That helps a lot. Turn it up. What I did is I took the piano and I made it darker to better match what's going on in the synths. And just for fun, because I'm a glutton for all things reverb, I'm going to throw a B2 on that atmosphere track, just a little bit, to see what that might do to that piano in particular. To me, that feels a little bit wider. I love the warbly synths too. That feels really good to me. So my only regret is that this comes in so late. This atmosphere. So honestly, I always start the track here. I think it's just a better loop point with both of those coming in. Let's see what that feels like if we move it to the front. All right, let's pop in the sound effects. It's so nice because it's so atmospheric. It lets the scene breathe. Great job. All right, let's give some applause for Claire. Really cool. I don't know if I'm allowed to play favorites, but that was my favorite so far. Specifically because it was minimalistic enough to get out of the way so that the game itself, all the cool sound design could really shine. It supports it really well, but it was also interesting enough that you could totally listen to that all by itself, and it has enough little melodic gestures that it doesn't really get in the way. So really well done. That's a very, very hard thing to do. So you should be proud of yourself for that. So let's move on to Paul Alexander. Is Paul with us? Yes, Paul is with us.
I'm here.
So Airdrops, bring it on.
So, yeah, I guess I had 3 goals here, which was I felt like the gameplay sounds were in 2 flats. So I really wanted to stay there, but avoid the feeling of B flat or G minor. So I was trying to emphasize E flat and C minor a bit more, just to keep it pleasant. And I was trying really hard not to write too much, but after hearing Claire's track, I feel like, man, I really overdid it. So, but it's really cool to hear everyone's music. It's inspiring for sure. And I immediately, I think from a STEM standpoint, it was just deciding what goes where. I started with the Mbira. That was the first thing I really loved for a sound, and it really could have been in the ambient layer as well. But since the Mbira went the whole time, I decided to separate it out. But yeah, and just process the buses and not do anything on the mix. Mix bus was a key, I think, to try to get all the stems playing simultaneously to sound the exact same as the mix simultaneously. That was, the challenge, just making sure that there's not really much of a difference.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear it. This is Airdrops by Paul Alexander. Here's the full mix first, and then we'll do the layers after.
I think Claire's is still playing.
Awesome. Well, with the exception of accidentally playing Claire's track at the same time, what thoughts do we have? Aside from just being really strong, I thought it was really strong. Go for it, Jake.
I liked it. I loved the instrument choice, all the percussive clicks and pops and booms, and I don't know, it was really cool. I'd be curious to hear just kind of the first 30 seconds, but it looks like, just based on the waves here, the waveforms, it's pretty similar to what the rest of it was we heard, because just like the first 30 seconds was with Claire's music in the background. But my only comment would be, because we heard the first 30 seconds with Claire's, I would just say to add more ambience, because when we took Claire's off, it just kind of felt like kind of empty. But other than that, though, it was really, really cool. And it looks like you do have some ambient stuff going on, but yeah, it's just something more to keep us grounded or supported.
I really like the orchestration in this one. I think the rhythmic aspects really, it honestly really helps create a nice flow. And I don't really think that you overwrote at all. I know you said that before it started playing, but I think everything is balanced really well, and you made a lot of good choices.
Thank you very much.
Let's jump through some of these layers, and hopefully doing so, we'll be able to hear a little bit more of what's actually going on. So let's jump into, let's start with the ambient, and we'll build towards more motion as we go. Let's give this a shot. So I'll stop right there. I think that by itself already sounds really, really good and full, because your bass has this interesting percussive element to it that every time it hits, you could almost call that percussion. But I think so far your foundation is very strong. And if anything, I felt at some points it actually felt too busy, and it may have just been too many layers were playing at once. But it doesn't mean you didn't do the assignment well, because part of this assignment is actually giving the developers a little bit more than they need. That way they can piece things together and they can try different combos out. So let's continue trying that. Kind of like it just like that. Because my concern is, as soon as you start adding in these sound effects, which are so present, no fault of your own, it's just the nature of the game, I feel like that may have been warring for attention. So let me try with just some of those initial layers. That feels good to me. If we're going to have the bass, I'll just turn it way down. think of all the layers, the percussion is actually the strongest, and the ambient would be the second one, because those are kind of the two that without them, it's not as strong. But that's like the foundation. Really good job. Let's give a round of applause for Paul. Really well done on that one. That was very strong. And I feel like this one, probably more than any of them so far, really nails the assignment successfully as far as the stems go, because as you could see, I was trying all kinds of combos. And even though each combo kind of it forces you to kind of change the mixing levels a little bit to better adjust, that ultimately is exactly what game developers want. They want that full control. Because what was neat about this track is it got way bigger in the middle section. And so much of what we're seeing on screen is your character, completes this little challenge, and all of a sudden the world opens up to this new section. What a cool moment to have all of the music start swelling in with all the layers, and then it kind of dies back down to one or two layers once you start exploring again. So it really lends itself well to that. So very, very good job on this. Let's move on to Adam Morton. I don't think Adam's with us today. So we will jump right into his track, starting with the full mix. This is Avian Caves. That's what he called it. And let's go to the full mix. And we have two more. So Adam, and then we'll do Jake. So this is Avian Caves, Adam Morton. Let's jump right in. All right, let's hear some feedback for Adam's track. What are your thoughts?
I'll dive in. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really cool. I like the sound choices you have. The choir was a nice touch. I'm trying to I'm trying to put into words here my feedback. I guess it sounds, how would I put this? There's nothing about the track that gives me vibes specific to like the things that are unique about this game, if that makes sense. Like a lot of people have introduced, like Paul had some kind of jungle-y sounds, or Claire had that little synth. I don't know, just they had these textures that reminded me of this game or that matched these visuals. I would just say this needs something to like to reflect that, to reflect what makes this game unique. And I hope that helps, Adam, when you watch this. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, everything else is great, and it's really simple, and it works, and it seems like it would loop really perfectly. So really good job.
Yeah, I think my piece of feedback was very similar to that. Like I thought the instrument choices were awesome. Like where the percussion hits kind of came in and out was great. I wanted the way that I would have accomplished kind of what Jake was saying is I kind of wanted the choir sound design to be a little bit weirder, whether that's, you know, more ambient, like have some modulation, or more reverb to be like pushed in the background. I thought that could have been a way to potentially accomplish more of the, you know, fitting with the visuals of the game.
I agree with Matt. It's a very cool idea, and it's a very cool choir sound. I would maybe add like more textural development in the second part, maybe like a sub layer of maybe like whispers or something. So to create just more of a, you know, of an array, of a fullness for the arrangement.
Anybody else? Well, my initial thought was, I feel like any 4 bars of this as a snapshot do fit what's going on in picture. My challenge is the arrangement. To me, right now, I talk about in video game music how, in general, the goal is to try to write one piece of music for the scene. And I think he's done that very successfully, where this is like the one thing we see on picture. It's almost like composing to a still image, right? Like this kind of represents that moment. But as we all know, games ebb and flow. The colors change, the environments change as we're moving along. So we want the music to also do the same thing. So I think with video game music in particular, it's important to have some kind of dynamic range. Even if it's a small dynamic range, I would call this track maybe a 5, when really we need to be between a 5 and a 7 out of 10, 5 to 7. That way it needs to start smaller, get bigger, come back down. Nothing super dramatic like a movie trailer track, but the idea is to have a little bit more arrangement change, variety, if you will. And I think this just kind of fell trapped to that. I think in large part it has to do with the percussion, because the percussion literally is like a 2-bar loop that just keeps going the whole time, and that kind of steals the energy away. But it's also because if you look at the waveforms, you can see how it's literally the exact same rhythm for the entire track. The rhythm never changes, of how the choir is exactly the same length every single time. And I think that what it does is after about 3 or 4 repetitions, our brains just like shut it off. Same thing for the harp, same thing for the bass, and same thing for the percussion. So what happens is our brains, after about 3 or 4 repetitions, we're just done. And it feels like a chore. And it's not anything against the music, right? Or against Adam. It's just one of those things we have to be aware of. So there are a few slight changes that you could make to this, just rhythm alone, that would make a substantial impact. So something as simple as the choir. I'll see if we can do it here. Maybe. But something, let me just start with the choir. If I just sew the choir. I love the chords, by the way. Like the chord arrangement is fantastic. Just a thought, something that we could play around with, is what if we just took this, let me put this tiny little fade on it, and what if all of a sudden for the next 2 bars we do this epic delay or something that would cause this to be slightly more interesting. So I'll go over here to some kind of delay, like this. Let's do something pretty extreme. Like Matt was saying, like what can we do to try to just make this interesting beyond what we'd expect? Okay, so here's what we have now. whatever, right? Same notes, but all of a sudden it's like doing this weird bouncy thing. Would even something as simple as that make a difference? I don't know. Maybe. Okay, maybe that's not extreme enough, but it's starting to do something musically that I find is getting interesting. So let's try. I'm actually just doing isolated events here. I'm not throwing a whole plugin on the track. I'm actually just doing it to an individual clip. So let's do some really weird reverb for just that moment. That's just like baked in. Or even something as weird as, I don't know, just changing it up. Anything. Okay, not the best example, but you get the idea that something as simple as going through and chopping up, maybe instead of just whole notes, it could be quarter notes, da da, or half notes, or skip a beat. So what I'm seeing in this mix, in this arrangement, is the lack of silence, right? It's like a repetition of a beat. So there's a lot arrangement-wise we could do there. There's also no melody. Not that there needs to be a melody necessarily for ambient music, but this is a suggestion. Something as simple as like a synth bell, as we saw on Claire's track, or something as simple as throwing in some kind of percussion every once in a while that's slightly different. There's a need for some variation here. But I think in general, if I were to just throw away the choir, for example, does this track still work? Which is kind of the goal. Let's find out. So I think that same issue is perpetual throughout the track. I think any of the suggestions mentioned here would make a huge difference. But all in all, I do think it still is a cool piece of music, and it's a great snapshot. We just need to work on kind of extrapolating it a little bit further with some more variation, which I think is always helpful in any piece of music, but especially game music. So awesome. Let's give Adam a round of applause in the live chat, and let's move on to our last... I want to say contestant, but we're not competing. Our last contestant, Jake. So this is From Flowers to Caves. Tell us a little bit about this track, Jake, and your experience working with layers.
So, yeah, I was going for just kind of more ambience and out-of-the-way stuff. But kind of like Paul said, once I heard Claire's, I realized I didn't really do that well at it, but that's okay. I had a lot of fun with it. Maybe I had too much fun though, but I guess that's why we have layers. And yeah, I don't know. I tried to go for acoustic space. I just kept referencing the one sheet audio description thingy, and tried to make sure I was sticking to that. And I went for E flat. What is it? When it's sharp 4, is it Lydian? Yeah. I always get stuff. Yeah, that was kind of my key center, just kind of bounce between that and F major. So harmonically it's super simple, but I tried to put variety in the textures.
Yeah. And even just not knowing anything about this piece of music except that you wrote it in Lydian, from a planning perspective, that was a great choice, because Lydian with a sharp 4 in the key degree, in the key scale degree, whatever it's called, that would mean that in our scale we have a B flat and an E flat, but instead of instead of an A flat, right, we're going to do an A natural. And so that slight brightness, the occasional use of that A note instead of an A flat, is going to, it's going to kind of brighten the mood to an otherwise dark piece. So I think that's a cool choice. One of many solutions. And let's take a listen. So From Flowers to Caves, we'll listen to the full mix and then go back for some feedback. Here we go. Wow, that is super strong. Can't wait to hear some feedback on this one. What do you have?
Yeah, I definitely think this one is my favorite. And before the bass and percussion beat started, I think it was like more like not what's the word? Not stale, but more passive. Yeah. And as soon as it hit, it just bumped the atmosphere. And I think it's very fitting. And the touch of the rain sound instrument at the end, just adding this textural, fullness. I love it, man.
I really like this track, especially Lydian mode. Love it. And if there's any criticism, I think whenever the drums and bass come in, the way it's mixed is probably appropriate for that style of music. But I think in this environment, if it was toned down a little bit, it distracts just a little bit from the visual scene with that mix. So that's the right sound for the idiom of that style of music. It's maybe not the right sound for the game, but I mean that's nitpicking right there. It's really beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, my favorite thing about this, okay, it's working. My favorite thing about this track were the transitions. I thought that the transitions were really, really excellent. It just sort of carried the listener along, and all of a sudden we were in a completely different sound texture and soundscape, and we didn't even realize how we got there. So that was really well done. I'm curious to hear how it will work with the flute sound effects. To me, it might sound a little busy, but I don't know, it might not. So yeah, really, really strong track.
Yeah, I mean, I echo all that was said before. My only concern as well, this is very well produced, very well. I love the transitions, and yeah, I think you mentioned in the live chat that was a strummed cello. That's so cool. There's so many interesting sound choices here that make it feel like it's its own unique world, yet it still is very much contained in that pop-like production. So it's very clean, and at any point I could listen to the stereo field and identify, oh, that's a really cool, guitar sound or cello sound. You can almost just pinpoint exactly what each instrument is, and yet together they work very cohesively, which is, as Paul mentioned, that's like part of the idiom of writing for that pop style. So my one concern is, how is this going to work in context? Is this too much energy? Is this too much, particularly in the drum and bass? It feels like it might be too much for an ambient type setting, but let's play with it. Let's see specifically with the layers what happens as we add and detract, which is the whole point of doing layers anyway. So let's try that out. So instead of using them full mix, let's start with what I imagine would be the lowest key instrument, which is the strings and synth. I'm going to start by disabling the sound effects completely. And let's just start building this thing from the bottom up. All right, so those feel way too loud dynamically. So let's just turn the whole track down. Like, I love this kind of thing because we're swelling towards something. I like the notes and everything. I think it's just the intensity. So what I would do, just like from a production standpoint, I'd probably take any of these larger chunks like this. And Pro Tools has a really cool function here. Let's do this. You can literally just turn them all down, the waveforms. But you see how much I'm turning this thing down like 20 dB. It's a lot, but then I'll just go through and kind of crossfade them between the sections, etc. Like that. See, I like that. I like a little, but not a, it's not a flood, but it's just this nice little dynamic pulse. I think that's what you're intending. That feels really good. the keys and ARPs. Really cool, just super loud. And to me, it sounds a little dry or a little bright for the context. So I'm just going to throw an EQ on it. We'll start there. That's usually the best place to start if you want to change the sound. Very, very slight here, but I'm talking like somewhere in this 5K-ish range. It feels too bright. That may have solved it. That feels so much better. And what it does is it leaves space for your percussion, and it leaves space for all the sound design that's we're about to add on top. Let me check out this miscellaneous percussion at the top. Okay, that's a rain stick. Love it. Or something similar to a rain stick. Very appropriate for jungle vibes. Same thing. It feels way too bright in the mix. So same kind of treatment. And because it's a very high frequency sound, we don't need to waste all that frequency space. So we could take this sucker all the way up to probably 500 to be just fine and get the effect.
Ask your question.
Cool. I didn't realize there was something happening here. Let me crank up my my waveforms. There it is. It's really quiet. Ooh, that bass. Okay, so your bass and perk. This is going to be the main thing that's probably going to make the biggest difference. It just needs to be toned down to fit the context. It was super cool all by itself, but even that, can you guys feel the difference? In my headphones, I can really hear the difference because these are very bass sensitive. But even just taking that off, feel the difference between this, which is the original, which is like, whoa, like kick me in the face, level of low end versus like it's just controlled. And all I did was roll off, 37 hertz? Nothing crazy. But what it does, it squeezes the production together a little bit to be tighter. This is just 2 tracks right now. So let's add these back in. Cool. That's most of what we were feeling in the first version. Is the kick and bass were just so punchy, which is cool all by itself, but in a game context, it's just distracting. So we have to use EQ to kind of shape it down a little bit, and volume-wise, turning it down a bit. That feels very, very clean. Love that. Okay, strings. EQ isn't going to solve a lot here. I do want to do just a tad of reverb to now help it soar above the mix. That way it doesn't feel like it's caught up in it. When I say that term, I'm referring to 3D mixing. So much of what we do in mixing is typically horizontal, which is your panning, vertical, which is your EQ, which is like how much circular space it's taking up. But to get to that 3D level, we start using delays and reverb to help fill in the space. It's that stereo width. And so this melody is this really high-pitched melody. It's this long string line. So because everything else is so tight and central, it sounds very tight and beautiful and punchy, which matches the visuals of moving. What I want to do is take this melody, this last layer, and just kind of let it soar on top if we're thinking in a 3D space. So I just threw on, we'll see how much it actually needs. Let me isolate it so everybody can hear it. Okay, so without reverb, like this. It's gorgeous by itself. It sounds very close and intimate, but it conflicts with everything else that's going on. But even just with 20-30% of a hall reverb, it now shines on the top end, vertically and Z-axis. It feels really good to me. And put these all together. Yeah. That feels very, very controlled now. So let's play this with the sound effects and let's listen to it. All right, everybody. Fantastic work. Everybody, let's give a huge round of applause to Jake and, of course, to everyone who participated. Man, really cool tracks. There was not a bad track in the bunch. Some of them just need a little bit of work, and that's totally fine. That's part of why we do this, is to get feedback. And if any of you have worked with game developers before, it's quite rare to nail it on your first try, especially with your very first time working with a brand new game developer. Sometimes it takes multiple, and I've had plenty of instances where I've gone into the 10, 15, 20 revisions just because, especially on the first track working with somebody, because you have two very different visions and you just have to keep revising and figuring this thing out until you get that palette, and then you can run with it for the rest of the soundtrack. But man, this was a super fun challenge. I got to participate in it 2 weeks ago, and I really enjoyed doing that as well. And I hope you guys did. And hopefully this is just a very valuable learning experience. And we've reached out to the game dev team as well to get direct feedback from them on your tracks. And I think that's going to be just an extra layer of really valuable insight and learning experience. So we're going to wrap up the party here at this point, but thank you for everybody participating, and I hope everyone in the live chat had a good time. We had a really good turnout there as well. So I'm excited. I know that in some coming months, we have some really fantastic A-list game composers coming to join us in some chats and some more feedback and such. So it's going to be an incredible year. So thank you all for being a part. We're going to end it there, but I hope you had a good time, and we'll see you next week as usual. For the next live stream. So thank you guys for being a part. I really appreciate it.
Can I ask a quick question, Steven?
Absolutely.
So those EQ changes in my track, were those in the context of this game specifically, or any game soundtrack, or just music in general, like as a standalone track?
I was specifically thinking through the lens of this game.
Okay.
Because I didn't have any issues with the mix when we listened to it the first time. It was as soon as we started putting it to these sound effects and trying to find some kind of balance. It was mainly the low end. It was the kick and the bass that were really distracting from everything else. And maybe the one global comment was on the strings, like the melody, not kind of soaring on top. But because we're specifically trying to get like ambient music out of this, that was the goal, is to like what we could do to keep the layers active but shape them just a little bit. Yeah, I think it was mostly just for this instance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but great work, everybody. This was super fun. I look forward to seeing everybody again soon. And of course, for those who are not as a part of the VGMA Pro, come join us. It's a lot of fun. Come join the waitlist. We're going to open again soon. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you'll hear more about that in the next week or so. But to everyone who joined us today,